Hey everyone, this is Tim. I'm a Python engineer and one of the maintainers of the Quix Streams open source library. And today, we're going to cover the new features and changes in Quix Streams 2.9, which includes a new sync framework, more serialization options, a new commit interval type, and more. Oh, and real quick before we dive in, be sure to like and subscribe because that lets us know that you're finding this kind of content helpful. But with that, let's go ahead and jump in. All right, well, the first thing that we're going to cover is optional installs, largely because they're kind of a prerequisite for some of the other features that have been added in this new version. Now, it is important to kind of highlight that word optional, or also the word extra. They're kind of used back and forth in the Python world, but they are essentially installation requirements that are strictly optional. You only install them if you are using the actual features that use them. So as an example, we have added Avro serialization in this version, and in order to use that, you do have to install a few libraries that Avro depends on. And so here we have, just as an example, your normal install that we all know and love. And with the Avro one, what you do is you put in square brackets the extra that you need in order to install those requirements. And I do have it in quotes here because some terminals are going to actually error out because of the square brackets. So it's just safe to put it in quotes. Might work for you without them. But then if you want to do multiple optionals, you can actually do a comma separated list. And then for ultimate safety measure, you can just use the word all, which will include every extra that we have. Probably overkill, but it is an option nonetheless. And on top of that, we are going to try to go out of our way to point out when certain optionals are necessary in order to use some features. So do keep an eye out for that. But if you're ever also unsure of what options are available, you can actually look in the root directory of our repository. We actually have in the pyproject.toml a list of all the different optionals that you can install. So feel free to take a look at that. But with that, let's go ahead and talk about those features that actually use some of these new extras. All right, and the first feature we're going to cover that actually uses those new optional installs is all the new serializers that we've added. But I'm going to actually start off with one that does not require any of those extra installs, and that is JSON schemas. So this is kind of a good lead-in into this whole approach of all the serializers that we've added here, which is effectively they now all use schemas. And the JSON serializer has actually been around since the very beginning, effectively, of the Quix Streams Python library. But now you have the option of essentially passing a schema to validate it against. So that is a long-winded way of basically saying this is a optional addition. If you wish to include this, you can use it. If you don't want to, you can basically just keep using your JSON serializer as you have been. This does require, however, rather than using, it used to be that you could just say, for example, provide a string like JSON here, right, in order to use a serializer. But that is no longer an option if you wish to pass a schema to use as a validator in this case. But other than that, that's really the only difference here. We are now capable of supporting this. And then along that, we support other different schema types, which is now the Avro and protobuf serialization approaches. And you do need to use the optional installs of the Quix Streams Avro or Quix Streams protobuf install. So just make sure you install those accordingly. And of course, there are all different sorts of particulars with using a different type of serialization. But effectively, you just import the serializer and deserializer that you need. You pass it to the app.topic, just like you did with our previous JSON one. And as long as you've done all the nitty-gritty details of that correctly, all should be well. Now, with that remark in mind, you might be wondering, well, these are very common things that are used with a thing called schema registry. So you guys got anything like that in the works? And I would say just stay tuned for the next few releases. You might just happen to come across that. So let's go ahead now and move on into our next big feature called syncs. All right, so our biggest feature that we probably have in version 2.9 is syncs. So what exactly is a sync? Well, of course you have all this data now in your Kafka ecosystem, and now you want to dump it to some external location. Maybe it's S3, maybe it's InfluxDB, whatever it might be. There's many, many choices, right? But basically this allows us to provide you a structure with which you can do that and abide to all the different restraints and requirements that are inside an application. And on top of that, we give you a framework that you can then write your own and then contribute as a user. So we're really, really excited to provide you syncs. Let's go over this one in very brief detail. this is the InfluxDB sync that will actually work out of the box for you. So we provided two of them out of the box that will work. We have an InfluxDB3 sync, and then we also have a CSV sync, which is a little bit more development focused, but this is production ready sync. Now, another thing I wanted to comment on is that syncs are in a beta phase. So what that means is the interface that you see right now could change dramatically over time. There's still a lot of moving parts. As I mentioned before, there are numerous different sync endpoints that could come up over time. And we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate all of those and that we've thought of all the different edge cases. So it might be that this changes, but this is the current state of it at the moment. So as you can see, we have our application, we have a topic that we've defined, which is the topic you are going to read from and then dump externally to a source. And here is an example of us importing that out of the box InfluxDB sync that I talked about. There's going to be various parameters that are required. These are all going to be, of course, unique to whatever sync that you are working with. And then here's the stuff that you're familiar with. You're going to, of course, take your data frame. You're going to do some processing and manipulations here. And then you're going to finalize your SDF with SDF.sync, and you then pass the particular sync object that you're going to be working with, which is an InfluxDB sync here, and you just hand that here. Now, it is important to note that once you have called this SDF.sync, you are now no longer able to add any other transformations or any other things, period, to this function. So if you try to do SDF.toTopic, not going to work. So just keep that in mind when you do that. It is basically it creates a lock on that SDF. Now, why would you use a sync? Well, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to do it. First of all, it provides you a consistent framework to operate in. So this way, the interface to all of them is the same. Now, that's obviously part of the challenge of writing syncs, is making it to where it does kind of operate in a similar fashion to all of them. But nonetheless, this does provide that structure and framework. And then also, because it is structured this way, it allows us to operate that sync within the application framework, and it helps us to not overproduce more messages than we have to, than if you just did it in like an SDF.apply. And it also allows us to do this idea of back pressure, which is, as you imagine, as you're trying to dump data to an external source, it can only handle so much load usually. It's not as fast as Kafka, of course, and there's, network limitations and things of that nature. So this allows us to basically, as we're hitting those network errors, it provides a framework for you to write basically how to handle those failures and to back off gracefully and then retry when it has the opportunity to do so and it can accept data again. So it's a really powerful feature that will really make your life so much easier if you use it. And of course, we want users like you guys to contribute your own syncs, and we will have we're still kind of deciding how the community section of that is going to look like, but we will provide a way for users to provide their own syncs and make those available to everybody, so we have a huge contribution model that everybody can take advantage of. So it's a very exciting feature, and I hope you guys go ahead and take a look. If you wish to start contributing to something like that, you can look over in this directory in the Quix Streams library. It's the Quix Streams syncs base sync, and that will have the base class for you to build off of. And of course, you can use the current ones that we have, like the InfluxDB3 and then the CSV. You can use those to work off of as kind of like a template. So I hope you guys are excited to dive in, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Now we're getting into some of the quality of life additions that show up in version 2.9. And the first one I really want to highlight is the new commit every option. Now, to kind of give that option some context, I want to go over the commit structure that currently exists in the application, which is effectively we're consuming a bunch of messages, doing those transformations to them, and then effectively over a certain time interval, we will then eventually commit those via a checkpoint. And that commit time is every 5 seconds, effectively right now. That's the default in the application. You can change it if you want. But right now, we're not talking about the interval. We're talking about a new option, which is what if you instead, rather than over time, you want to actually commit those results after processing or consuming a certain amount of messages. In this case, I've put 10,000 messages. Well, now you can do that. And by default, it's actually going to be 0. So this is going to be a strictly overall optional addition to application. So if you don't want to do this commit every behavior, basically don't provide it and you're going to be good. But if you do want it, go ahead and provide a value. Like I said, I added 10,000 here. And what's going to happen is it's going to be a strictly or situation. So as you're consuming messages, as soon as it hits either the threshold of 5 seconds or consumed 10,000 messages, it is then going to attempt to do the commit. So hopefully for those of you who have been really aching for this feature, I hope that this provides a lot of alleviation for that pain point. All right, let's go over the last quality of life addition in 2.9, and that is being able to ignore errors when using sdf.drop. As you'll recall, we added sdf.drop in the last version, and basically what was happening was as people were using it, they were encountering issues where they just wanted to drop the column if it existed, and then if not, just continue processing as normal. So we wanted to add the ability for people to ignore errors when a column was missing. Because right now by default, it essentially crashes the application if you run into trying to drop a column that does not currently exist. So now we have this new errors flag, and all you have to do is pass the word ignore to it, and then it will essentially trudge on like that column didn't exist to begin with. Now by default, it is still going to remain raise. So if you want to change this, you must go out of your way to change it. But hopefully for those of you that were suffering from this pain point, this makes your life a lot easier. All right, my friends, that's all I've got for you for Quix Streams 2.9, but be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest features and changes that show up in Quix Streams. And until then, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next video.